Here's something that will give you chills. In 1891, a woman named Sybil Corbett took a photograph of an empty library at Combermere Abbey. The exposure took an hour, and she was certain no one entered the room. Her own diary confirms this. But when the photograph developed, there was a transparent figure sitting in the chair, the exact spot where Lord Combermere always sat before his recent death. This image became one of the most famous ghost photographs ever taken. This wasn't just another Victorian curiosity. This was happening during an era obsessed with death and mourning, when families desperately sought connections to their lost loved ones. Was it really the spirit of the dead Lord? Or something else entirely? What we discovered about this photograph will make you question everything you think you know about how photography itself became the perfect bridge between the living and the dead. When photography first opened the door to the dead, the invention of photography in 1839 accidentally created the perfect tool for talking to the dead. Picture this. You're living in the early days of photography, when taking a single picture was an ordeal that could test anyone's patience. The daguerreotype process demanded long exposures of several minutes. We're talking about standing perfectly still, frozen like a statue, while the camera slowly captured your image on a metal plate. Here's where it gets strange. If someone moved during those long minutes, something eerie happened. Sir David Brewster observed in 1856 that passing movement left faint traces under these long exposures, ghostly, transparent figures that appeared in the final photograph. Their moving bodies became see-through shadows, floating like spirits across the image. Imagine the shock of seeing these phantom-like forms appearing in what should have been a normal family portrait. Brewster realized something that sent chills down his spine. These faint traces looked exactly like what people imagined spirits would look like. The resemblance was so perfect it seemed impossible to ignore. These weren't just photographic errors. They were creating images that matched every ghost story and supernatural tale people had ever heard. Then came glass plate negatives around 1859, and things got even more mysterious. Photographers could now reuse these glass plates to save money. But sometimes, faint remnants of earlier exposures sometimes showed up, creating unintended double exposures. These glass plates also enabled deliberate multiple exposures, building on Brewster's earlier observations about photographic anomalies. Imagine developing a photograph in your darkroom and seeing the face of someone who was never there during the shoot. They're staring back at you from the shadows, their features barely visible, but unmistakably human. Your hands would shake as you held that plate up to the light, wondering how this person appeared in your camera when they were never in your studio. This wasn't just a technical problem happening in isolation. Death surrounded everyone in the Victorian era. Cholera outbreaks killed thousands. Child mortality rates were crushing. People desperately wanted to believe their loved ones were still around, watching over them from beyond the grave. The timing felt almost supernatural. Photography arrived just when people needed proof that death wasn't the end. The coincidence seemed too perfect, as if photography itself was designed to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. These early photographic accidents were about to become something much more intentional. The rise of the spirit photography empire. What started as photographic accidents became a booming business built on the deepest human pain. Photographers realized they could make serious money from people's desperate need to connect with their dead loved ones. In 1862, William Mumbler changed everything. This simple jewelry engraver claimed he accidentally photographed his dead cousin's spirit while testing his camera. The transparent figure appeared right next to him in the photograph. Word spread like wildfire through Boston. Mumbler saw an opportunity that would make him rich. What people didn't know was that his spirits were actually reused plate images of former clients. Mumbler didn't just take one spirit photo and call it a day. He opened an entire studio dedicated to reuniting the living with their dead loved ones. Desperate families paid him huge sums for a chance to see their deceased relatives one more time. A single spirit photograph cost $10 when most people earned less than $1 a day. His most famous client walked through his doors in 1872. Mary Todd Lincoln herself paid Mumbler to photograph her with the spirit of her assassinated husband. The resulting image showed the former First Lady seated while a ghostly Abraham Lincoln appeared to hover behind her chair with his hands placed protectively on her shoulders. This photograph made Mumbler a celebrity and brought him clients from across the country. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Frederick Hudson opened his London studio using different methods. Hudson modified his camera to hold pre-exposed images. He could create spirits on demand by layering these hidden photographs onto his clients' portraits. His technique was so convincing that even educated people believed they were seeing real supernatural phenomena. The French photographer Edouard Bouguer took the deception even further with his elaborate productions. He crafted fake spirits using dolls wrapped in white gauze with actual photographs of faces carefully attached to them. His studio became a theater where grief met artistry. Clients never suspected they were paying to see carefully constructed props instead of their loved ones. In 1875, Bouguer was prosecuted for fraud and made a full confession about his methods. These photographers weren't just taking pictures. They were selling hope, comfort, and closure to people drowning in grief. Their businesses grew rapidly as word spread about their supernatural abilities. But as their methods became bolder and their claims more outrageous, their success was about to attract some very unwelcome attention. The Great Exposure. When the truth came to light, the investigations began in earnest. By the 1920s, spirit photography had become so popular that it caught the attention of Harry Houdini and the Society for Psychical Research. These investigators decided to take action. They couldn't stand watching desperate people get fooled any longer. In February 1922, investigators Harry Price, magician Seymour, and Eric Dingwall set an elaborate trap for William Hope, one of the most famous spirit photographers still operating. They came up with a brilliant plan to catch him red-handed. Price and his team provided Hope with glass negatives that had been secretly marked with X-rays. These invisible marks would prove whether Hope was using their plates or switching them out. When Hope returned the developed photographs, something shocking appeared. The spirit photographs showed up on completely unmarked plates. This gave them undeniable proof that Hope was switching out their negatives with his own pre-prepared fakes. The evidence was crystal clear. Hope had been caught in his own web of lies. Here's the most shocking part. Even when presented with concrete evidence, believers like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle refused to accept the truth. The creator of Sherlock Holmes published his defense of Hope in his 1922 book, The Case for Spirit Photography. Doyle was so invested in spiritualism that no amount of proof could change his mind. Edouard Bouguer's downfall was even more dramatic. He was arrested in Paris and actually confessed to his fraud. Bouguer admitted he had been using dolls wrapped in gauze with photographs of faces attached to them. His confession appeared in newspapers across France and England. The public finally saw how their beloved spirit photographs were really made. P.T. Barnum himself took William Mumbler to court. The famous showman commissioned a fake photograph of himself with Abraham Lincoln's ghost to demonstrate how easily these images could be created. Despite expert witness testimony revealing the fraud, Mumbler was surprisingly acquitted. The legal system struggled to keep up with photographic deception. The most devastating revelation came when a client recognized her purported spirit as someone still alive. This prompted fraud charges focused on reused plates and double exposures. One by one, the spirit photography empire crumbled as their techniques were exposed. The Victorian era of spirit photography was ending, but something tells me the human need to see beyond death wasn't going anywhere. In conclusion, today's digital ghost hunters still chase the same dream as those Victorian photographers. They want proof that death isn't the end. But now they call their mysterious orbs and shadows paranormal evidence instead of spirit photography. These modern investigators use digital cameras and EMF meters to capture what they believe are spirits. The technology has changed completely. Digital photography creates new artifacts that people mistake for ghosts. Those glowing orbs in photos are actually backscatter from dust, pollen, or insects reflecting camera flash. But the human need to believe in something beyond death remains exactly the same. Next time you see a ghost photo online, remember the lesson of spirit photography. Sometimes the most convincing evidence is just the most carefully crafted illusion. From that lonely library chair in 1891 to digital night vision cameras today, the line between grief and illusion remains as haunting as ever. Which spirit photograph intrigues you most? Let me know in the comments below.